Today we're going to talk about flag theory. Flag theory means go where you're treated best, and it's about applying that concept to every aspect of your life. You can internationalize and globalize your citizenships, your residencies, your bank accounts, and you can use that to your benefit. It's about how can you diversify your assets. We all know about diversifying your investments, but how do you diversify yourself in a way that you can take optimal advantage? We call every flag is like every citizenship you have is a flag. Every residency is a flag. Every bank account in a different country is a flag. So that's what we refer to as flags. And some flags are more difficult to get than others. And which flags you want depend on your preferences and choices. So let's talk about the types of flags that we have. One is citizenship. Your nationalities and your passports. You have residency as a flag. So what people often don't understand is that you don't necessarily have to live in a country permanently to be a resident. And same with tax residency. You can have a different residency and have a different tax residency. People don't often understand that you can separate those two concepts. And that's really important for optimizing your setup. You have a driver's license is a different flag. You have medical tourism is a different flag. So if you have a doctor, and maybe you're already doing this without knowing, and the treatment for your disease is better in another country, you're using medical tourism. You have flags of banking, having different bank accounts, different investments. You can optimize on various levels. So the flags that we'll focus on today, which are the most important ones that apply to all of you, is one, your citizenship. Two, your residency, your tax residency, your company, where you set up your company. And this is important. A lot of people think, oh, this doesn't apply to me. I don't make millions. I don't make tens of thousands every month. Even if you work as a freelancer, if you have a small business, you can set up a business, a company that suits your needs. And with that come banking accounts. And once you start having savings, you want to diversify your investments as well. So let's start with citizenship. If we can go one slide back, is the most challenging flag to obtain. Countries don't just give out citizenships very easily, but it is a very important flag because citizenship gives you a passport, which gives you free access to the world. So it's about emotionally separating yourself from your country, my citizenship, and just really looking at a passport as a way to give you access into different regions for travel, for investing, for studying, for whatever you need. But citizenships, there's different ways to acquire citizenships. One is through ancestry. So for example, for Europeans, a lot of times if you live in a different country, but your parents had citizenship in any European country, you can acquire it through ancestry. There's also citizenship by investment, which means you can either donate money. So a lot of countries in the Caribbean, if you pay $150,000, you can buy a passport. Or you have citizenship by investment. For example, in Turkey, if you invest $400,000 into real estate, you can apply for citizenship. And those $400,000 are invested under your name. So once you have citizenship, you can sell it. And the other good way to get citizenship is through birth tourism. So a lot of countries like Brazil, Mexico, and Chile, if you give birth in those countries, your child is automatically a citizen of that country. And in countries like Brazil, if you stay there for 1 year, the parents can acquire citizenship as well. So not saying go make babies just to get the citizenship, but if you're planning on a family, why not have your child in Brazil, for example, in Mexico and Chile? And I just started a separate company with two business partners called My Birth Abroad, where we help people go through that whole process because it can be very intimidating. And residency is the next important flag. So most of you, when we enter a country, we need a visa, right? Sometimes we don't need a visa at all. Sometimes we need to apply for a visa. The next step to that is temporary residency. That's usually a shorter term residency, usually valid for 2 to 5 years, where you can stay in that country indefinitely. And then after that, the next step is permanent residency, which is usually valid for 5, 10, 15 years. And you don't have to renew that residency as often. And what do we do when we look for which residencies make sense for us? One of the things we look for is minimal stay requirements. We're nomads. We don't want to many of us don't want to live in a country. If you do, that's okay too. So we want a residency that we can uphold and maintain without actually having to be there. We want it to be affordable. We don't want to pay hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to get the residency. And ease of process. How much paperwork do I need? What do I need to go file? Which documents, which types of apostilles and legalizations do I need? And residency is extremely important for broker setups. So if you have some stocks or some crypto, for example, if you have those crypto accounts running over, you always have to identify yourself. Who are you? Where do you live? And if you say, hey, I'm Xenia, I live in Germany, and then the information exchange happens with that country, in this case, Germany, and you fall under EU regulations. If you want to avoid falling under EU regulations, like the MiCA regulations, or you want a certain level of anonymity, you could set up a Paraguay residency and then use that residency to verify yourself with the account, and then you can diversify your setup. And that information exchange now only takes place with Paraguay, for example, if that's your residency, and you don't fall under the EU regulations. Next slide. So tax residency. So just because you're a resident in a country does not mean you're a tax resident in a country. Most countries have the rule of 183 days. Why 183 days? Because that's 6 months and a day. So if you spend 183 days in any one country, that means you've spent more time in that country than anywhere else, and in many places that makes you a tax resident there. There's exceptions. In some countries it's 120 days, in other countries it's 90 days, but 90% of the time that's a good rule that makes you a tax resident there. And it's important to understand that different countries have different tax systems. So again, it's important, you don't need to understand the details of every tax system, but you need to know that there are differences that you can use to your advantage for your global setup. Some countries are tax-free, there's no income tax at all. Some countries have territorial taxation. This means that any income earned outside of the country is tax-free. So if you're a tax resident there, income earned elsewhere does not have to be taxed. You have taxation on world income. You have residency taxation. You have special programs like non-dom, where you're a resident in a place but not a tax resident. That's usually limited to a few years. And then you have flat rate taxation, which is usually a 10-15% flat tax that you can pay no matter how much more you earn. So we can also have different company setups as digital nomads. We all have different businesses, different interests. And it's important to know that depending on what you do, how you earn your money, there's different setups that benefit you. We have US LLCs, for example. That's really good for people who are self-employed, who are not a resident of any country, or who are a resident of countries with territorial taxation. Remember, territorial taxation means you're not taxed if you earn your money outside the country. So say you're a resident of Paraguay, which has territorial taxation, you have a US LLC, that income is not taxed. In Cyprus, is generally recommended for traders. It's a bit more of an expensive setup, but it works well for trading and similar. We're in Bulgaria, and Bulgaria is really good for companies with substance. Substance means you have local presence, you usually hire local employees. It works well for some business models, and in Bulgaria it's very affordable to have these employees, and you can build up the structure with a simple management structure. And then Georgia is also, the country of Georgia is a good alternative to like the Emirates and Hong Kong and other trade-free zones. Now we're going to banking. Everybody needs a bank account, right? You need a personal bank account, and you need a bank account for your business. And a lot of us use fintech banks like Wise and Revolut. But it's important that, I talked about how the flags relate with each other, right? And so it's important where you set up your company so that you get a business account. The problem with setting up a company in Turks and Caicos or St. Kitts and Nevis is that banks usually hear that and they're like, those are like tax havens. We don't trust those jurisdictions. Compliance is too complicated. We're not going to give you a bank account for your business. So then you have a business with no bank account. So one of the reasons why the US LLC is so popular, because it's a business structure that people trust, that banks trust. They're like, it's a US business. And it's much easier to get a bank account for that business structure. So you really want to think about all the aspects of setting up your life, your business, your residency, to make sure it works out in the end. Also for private bank accounts, citizenships matter. Certain countries are sanctioned. So if you're a citizen or a resident of that country, you're not going to get bank accounts. And sometimes other citizenships can be problematic as well. KYC process. KYC means know your customer, and it's something that every bank has to do when they open up a bank account. They need to know who you are, where you live, where you're from, and in case of a business, they also need to know information about your business. And this is where these compliance residencies, where you can have different residencies in Paraguay, in Mexico, in Dubai, and you can use those residencies to diversify your setup and use whatever residency that bank allows. And then you can go into the world of credit cards, accumulating points, and travel hacking as well, which is related to the banking topic. Is investments. Okay, I really want you to listen, understand this. Money in the bank belongs to the bank, not to you. We all need banks and we use them, and we all have to have money in the banks because we need to make transactions, we pay with our credit cards. But it's important to know that banks ultimately can block your account. They can tell you how much money you can take out in a day. If the bank goes bankrupt, it's highly likely you're not going to get your money back. So this is not just scary, but it's to make sure you understand that you want to diversify. Don't have all your money in one bank. Don't have all your money in one bank, in one country, in one currency. It's important to diversify, just to have options. As things in this unpredictable world happen, we're experiencing really unsecure times. But for me, I'm never really worried because I'm like, great, I'm set up. No matter what happens, I have access to money here, I have access to money there, and I'm in a good position. And that's what I want you guys to take away as well. So we've talked about the principle of flag theory, that you build up different flags to benefit yourself, to grow your setup. There's not one setup that works for everyone, but we do have one setup that's extremely popular because it applies to most digital nomads and most of their setups. And so where do you start? As a digital nomad, you have to earn money, right? We have to support ourselves on the road, so we need a business. So in many cases, sometimes people can just personally invoice their clients. They don't need a business, but if you do, the US LLC is extremely popular for that. I talked about the banking aspect before, that banks trust a US LLC and you can get a Wise account, a Revolut account for your business quite easily. It's a limited liability structure, so it protects you from a legal standpoint. And if you're not operating from the US, if you don't have operations in the US, it can be tax-free. And it's considered a disregarded entity. So all the money you make through your LLC passes through to you and is only taxed where you are a tax resident. So if you're not a tax resident anywhere, you don't have to pay taxes. If you're a tax resident in a country with territorial taxation, where foreign income is tax-free, also legally, where foreign income is not taxed, you're also tax-free. High discretion. As the companies in the US, the LLCs, you have different states. They're registered in the system. You can register the company so that your name does not show up in the registry. So you have high discretion, which some people prefer. Good global reputation, and it's very easy and affordable to set up. Paraguay. Paraguay is one of the most popular residency flags that we have. It's very quick to obtain. So when you fly to Paraguay, within one visit, you can apply for residency, and then it takes about 3 to 5 months to get the residency. It's affordable. We're talking about $2,500 to set it up. And you have minimal stay requirements. You don't have to be in Paraguay for very long. The first time you get the temporary residency for 2 years, then you get permanent residency for 10, and you only have to be there once every 3 years. So you don't have to be there 6 months a year or whatever. And we talked about territorial taxation. We love countries with territorial taxation because foreign income earned is tax-free. Your US LLC is tax-free, your stocks, your crypto, all of that. And you can even obtain a tax residency certificate. So some countries like Spain, Netherlands, they need a proof of a new tax residency to relieve you of your tax obligations in that country. So you can just go to Paraguay, set up your residency, set up your tax residency, and become tax-free from your home country. And we talked about the benefits for brokers and setting that up. And for example, your setup. You can set up a bank account in Georgia. Georgia is outside of the EU, which is a benefit to have an option outside of the EU. You can have a bank account that holds multiple currencies, dollars, euros, British pound. So you can hold whatever currency you think is best at the time. And it's a full banking solution. So a lot of times we're used to Wise, Revolut, and N26. These are online banks. And sometimes if you really have a problem, you need to talk to someone, it's not as easy. And for example, in Georgia, we call it a full bank solution. It's a bank account where you can walk into the store, walk into the bank itself and talk to someone and have a person to talk to. And you don't need to travel there, and you don't need residency verification. So with that, so are you ready to maximize your flags, whether it's a US LLC, whether it's a Paraguay residency, whether it's a Georgia bank account? And one thing I also wanted to mention is that, especially about citizenship, it's always good to have more citizenships than not, but the two citizenships we don't recommend is US and Eritrea. Why those two? Because those two are the only two countries that tax you based on your citizenship and residency, no matter where you live. So everyone else can optimize and can move their tax residency somewhere else. Americans and Eritreans, they can't. For the US citizens, there's exceptions. I don't know the details, but it's about if you make less than $120,000 a year and if you're outside of the US for X amount of days. But other than that, all the other passports you're able to optimize in ways that with US and Eritrea you can't. So on that note, denationalize.me, because your life is yours. And don't be intimidated if this was a lot. Just know there's options, know there's different systems. You can combine, you can play the game. I think it's fun. I love what I do. I love sharing it because you're always one step ahead of whatever changes, whatever new systems, new laws and regulations, and it becomes like a little treasure hunt. And it's really fun. And I really want to help everyone get started on their journey on digital nomadism and set up their business and to have more time to focus on the business, focus on traveling, do the things they love, and less time dealing with all the bureaucracy and the paperwork. Find a partner for that, us or someone else to help you through that. So thank you very much.